What's up, everybody? Good afternoon. And since this is a little bit of a slower time for Huskies discussion, and normally if it was the off season, I would just, of course, let it go. But things are slow right now because the team isn't going to play for a month because they were good enough to make the playoff. So this is kind of an awkward time where obviously we're all very, very hot to trot on the Huskies because they had such a good season, and I want to discuss them, but there's nothing to talk about for a little while here. So, given that we can't really talk about the team and their games because they're not playing a game for a while, let's instead talk a little bit about the future of the program. It looks pretty bright, but clearly we're going to need a quarterback next year because Penix is definitely going to go to the NFL, and he's certainly earned whatever he's going to end up getting in the NFL and then some. So there's no real possibility of him sticking around like there is with a guy like Quinn Ewers. Some people think Quinn Ewers will stay back for another year. We are going to have to find somebody new. And there are a few guys who are already in the program. I think we actually have four quarterbacks right now. Now, one of them is Dylan Morris, and we're definitely not going to do that. The Dylan Morris experience is, I think we all know how that story ends. We don't need to see that story again. So there are really three guys we can pick from, but I get the sense that there's not a tremendous amount of faith in any of them because they're all unknowns. They haven't really played before. There isn't much to say about them. So it sounds like the Huskies are going to go out and try to get one of the transfer portal quarterbacks. These quarterbacks who have been in college football for a while and had success, but will try to have the ultimate success with UW's offense and passing game. And the name right now that is going through the ringer in terms of this is a guy that UW is really, really into is Will Rogers of Mississippi State. I personally, when it became clear that we were looking for a transfer portal quarterback, I would have loved. I mean, you guys have no idea how excited I would have been if we had gotten Arch Manning, but it sounds like he's going to stay at Texas for a year behind Ewers, which surprises the heck out of me, but sounds like he's actually going to stay there. I would have loved Riley Leonard. Sounds like he's going to go to Notre Dame or Ohio State. And I do want to be clear, anything can still happen with those guys. Like, they could still come to Washington. And I include Arch Manning in that conversation because he could change his mind, or the people who are speculating about him might just be wrong. So, that being said, I want to focus on the thing that seems the most likely right now. And right now, that is Will Rogers. So, the Mississippi State quarterback entering the transfer portal. Let's talk about him. So, Will Rogers is actually a name that I'm a little familiar with because there was a point last year where Will Rogers was playing so well that he was starting to get some draft hype and some Seahawks draft hype. We had a couple guys in my comments in chat suggesting maybe this is the quarterback of the future. Now, it fizzled out pretty quickly, but it speaks to how well he was playing at one point last year. If you go over to his sports reference page, you can immediately get an idea of what he's about. He's got decent size. It's not great size, 6'2", 205 pounds. I mean, he's not Matt Corral, but he's also not Riley Leonard. He's not Peyton Manning. He's average sized, I would say, good enough. And the numbers that he's put up in Mississippi State have been pretty extraordinary. The first year was rough, but then 2 straight years he had elite completion percentage up close to 74% in 2021. 2022 it dipped a little bit, but he was still really good across both seasons. 36 touchdowns, 35 touchdowns. Kept the turnovers relatively low. Really good touchdown to interception ratio. Ton of yards. 2023 was definitely a letdown season for him. He missed several games. He got hurt. His numbers were down. His efficiency was down. He just wasn't the same player. But this was a player who's had a lot of success at Mississippi State over that 4-year period. Over 12,000 yards, almost 100 touchdowns. So, very prolific. Also, if you take a look at his rushing stats, unfortunately, college football does their stats very stupid when it comes to rushing. So he's got negative rushing yards because he gets sacked sometimes. You can see that rushing is not a huge part of his game, but he does have a little bit of athleticism to him. I would compare his mobility to somebody like a Michael Penix, somebody who has it, can use it, but usually doesn't, and he's not extraordinary in that area. To talk about Will Rogers a little bit as a player, not just numbers. He's great on short passes. He makes very quick decisions. He's got a very quick release. He's got plenty of zip on the ball to get it to those slant routes down the field. He's got the ability to fit the ball into tight windows. He's very accurate. He's actually got a really nice deep ball, which I wasn't expecting because he's not a bigger guy, but for a smaller guy, he does have a little bit of ability to push the ball down the field. The main issues that he seems to have are just mechanics. Sometimes his mechanics break down a little bit. But in terms of giving you the arm that you would want in college football, he's pretty far up there. So I got nothing negative to say about the idea of bringing in Will Rogers as the quarterback of the next several years for the Huskies. I would have preferred a few others, but this is very good. I will say this, though, just speaking about this concept in general, as a Huskies fan, as a fan of any college football team, I kind of miss the days where you would recruit a player and then you'd get to watch that player grow over the course of several years under your program with the coaching staff, with teammates, etc., etc. You just had this. I know sometimes it would only be like 2 years, but you would have this period of time where you get to watch that guy grow. And you get to see them go from a guy who that first year probably wasn't that good to a guy who starts blossoming as time goes by. And then hopefully by the end, he's one of the best players in college football. I kind of miss that. We're not really seeing much of that lately, it feels like. It feels like right now, college football is more about you let another school groom the player, get them to the point where they're really good, and then you poach them through the transfer portal. Like, getting Will Rogers would probably be a 1 year thing, right? Because he's already played so much college football. He's probably got 1 year and then he goes pro. So there's not going to be any growing with that guy. He's just kind of a mercenary. And we went through this with Penix, and I have no problem embracing Penix. He played so well the last 2 years. But at the same time, I do look at this and I go, I kind of miss the idea of getting a player out of high school and then having them there for, now it would probably be 4 to 5 years, and they just grow in your system like you had with a guy like a Jake Locker or Jake Browning even. I know Browning was never hyper elite, but he did have very good moments in college football, and he was a capable college football quarterback. So hopefully at some point this team is able to find a 5-star out of high school that commits to Washington and stays at Washington his whole career. Because I would love to watch a quarterback grow and mature over half a decade rather than these mercenaries. But this is a great mercenary, and if UW decides to move forward with Will Rogers as their quarterback next year, I'm going to be pretty excited about that. I'm going to be pretty happy about that, and I'm going to feel like this team has a really good chance of keeping things up. Because you look at it, Rome Odunze's gone. I imagine that Fatanu's gone. The rest of the team is either going to be back or is pretty easily replaceable. I think most of the offensive line will be back. I think you're going to see Dylan Johnson come back if he can. McMillan will probably come back. Polk will probably come back. Westover actually is probably another guy who has to go because he's been here forever, but I don't think he's going to be super hard to replace. And it's going to be a good offense that's ready to go. It just needs a quarterback. All right, let me know what you guys think down below. Those are my thoughts on Will Rogers and this whole transfer portal stuff.